You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron, and hello to my UFL fans. Today, we are diving into the first of this season's Power Rankings going into week number 2 of the UFL. Week 1 kicked off with an absolute bang, and I tweeted it out earlier today. I do not think that this season of the UFL could have started any better, with some wild trick plays, a 64-yard field goal to boot, no pun intended there, but there was just so much that went down, and we're going to take a look at it all. I'm going to rank all 8 teams from worst to first, so I invite you all to do the same in the comment section down below. Let's dive into some power rankings. We'll go from number 8 all the way up to number 1, beginning with that bottom team. At number 8, I'm looking at the DC Defenders here, losing 27-12 to the San Antonio Brahmas. 2 big takeaways from this game here. First and foremost, wide receivers Dontavian Jackson and Chris Blair and running back Abram Smith are all sorely missed from this offense here, accounting for 2,036 total yards and 15 total touchdowns for the team in 2023. This is a completely different offense skill-wise, aside from Jordan Teamu leading the way, and I think that was very apparent this past weekend in San Antonio. On top of that, on the other side of the ball, it appears defensively some of the struggles that I was worried about with this team from last year may still be lingering. Obviously, very early in the year. It could change going down the road, but right now, it feels like more of the same from this defense and potentially even worse, and I'm a little bit concerned. Offensively, though, when you look at the team as a whole, I mean, there was just not really a lot of good. And this is coming from someone who is rooting for the DC Defenders in the XFL conference. I root for the DC Defenders in the XFL, and I root for the Houston Roughnecks in the USFL side. But offensively, 55% completion percentage, pretty much every other pass essentially either going complete and or incomplete. Your average yards per attempt through the air was just a measly 4.6 yards per attempt, which was worst in the league this weekend. You settled for 4 field goals. You were 0 for 3 in the red zone. I mean, there was just so much to not like about the team offensively. And then defensively, it really didn't get much better. You allowed the highest completion percentage of the weekend at just over 74%. You allowed the most touchdowns by any defense this weekend at 3. That's not including the big punt fake. And then also a 75% conversion rate on 4th down. Again, just not a lot to be happy about if you are a DC Defenders fan right now, and I get it. It just was not pretty, and this is, you hope it's not a sign of things to come for this season, but this is not the DC Defenders team that we saw from the XFL last season. This is a new DC Defenders team, especially offensively, and it's very clear some of those star players from last year are missed, and we're going to need to see some people step up for the DC Defenders. Otherwise, they're going to be toiling at the bottom of the league through this whole season here, because this was not pretty by any means. And again, this is coming from someone who is rooting for the Defenders here. I am genuinely concerned about the way they looked this past weekend. Coming in at number 7, we have ourselves the Houston Roughnecks. This is the other team that I'm rooting for here. So I'm having a fantastic time as a fan so far this season here, losing 18-12 to the Memphis Showboats here. If you lose a turnover battle, you typically lose games, and 3 fumbles in that game lost will do that to you. I'm left wondering kind of what this offense would look like had running back Mark Thompson been able to play, so hopefully he can get healthy and get back for this team. I will say there were some positives to take away from, like quarterback Jarrett, and his name's hard for me to pronounce, so I'm sorry if I butcher this, but I believe it is Guarantano. He was solid, 16 of 21, 157 yards, a rushing touchdown, no interceptions, no passing touchdowns, but he didn't really blow me away by any means. The team was 3 for 8 on 3rd down. It just kind of felt like the unit was stuck in the mud and struggling against a Showboats defense that was very, very aggressive and tough to deal with. Defensively, I want to shout them out because you know what? They did all they could to try to keep this game within reach for them here. Reuben Foster leading the way on this defense here. With 6 tackles on the day, he had an interception. He had a fumble recovery on top of that. But ultimately, just the offense being stuck in the mud kind of kept them from being able to come back, and it was too little too late coming into the 4th quarter there. I will say that we could be looking at one of the better defensive units in the UFL here. I think that when you look at the numbers, 3 sacks, he had 7 tackles for loss, he had 2 takeaways as well. On top of that, this unit is very aggressive. They're not afraid to go after the football, and you do have some big names here. And as I mentioned, led by Reuben Foster, a former first-round selection in the NFL, someone who wrongly had his NFL career taken away from him and still clearly has a lot of talent. And even the last year that he played in the USFL, he stood up and was able to play and stood up amongst the rest while he was healthy during that time there. So I'm glad to see him still getting his opportunity to showcase his talents here. But if the offense can't pick it up, this almost feels like we might be watching a really good defense get wasted away that can't help keep them off the field and allow them to rest and recover between drives. So hopefully things change offensively for the Roughnecks here, but we have got to see more from them going forward, because this is an exciting defense coupled with an offense that just did not have the oomph I think it really needed to be able to potentially pull off that win over the Showboats. Now, looking at number 6 here, I did a little bit of juggling between 5 and 6, but I ultimately settled on the Arlington Renegades at number 6, losing 27-14 to the USFL defending champions, 2-time champions, Birmingham Stallions. A humbling start at home for the XFL's defending champs. Offensively, the O-line really had a hard time opening things up on the ground for the running backs in this one. The team averaged just 13.3 yards per attempt on there. And quarterback Luis Perez was very up and down, I would say. He had some good moments, but he had some bad moments as well. Like, his interception was just such an ill-advised, like, Jesus take the wheel type of throw. I really when I saw it happen, I was like, oh my goodness. And then you see how the play unfolds, and you're like, yeah, that's kind of the result you were looking for in that. On top of that, you come up 0 for 2 in the red zone. That's not going to help you against the Birmingham Stallions teams. That's offense is just littered with talent right now. You got to be scoring touchdowns against the Stallions, and that's been the status quo for the last 2 years of spring football now. And Winstead reception for a touchdown aside, I think the wide receiver room still has a lot to prove. That was kind of something I talked about going into my preview for this matchup here. I will say you can keep an eye on Deontay Burnett. He had 5 targets for 5 receptions there. Sal Cannella still being, the guy as the tight end for them. But ultimately, the wide receiver room is a bit of a mixed bag here, and we're going to have to really see who steps up and ultimately helps elevate this offense to go forward. Defensively, really good first half. It just kind of fell apart in the second half, and you kind of started to get overwhelmed by just how much talent that Birmingham Stallions offense had. I really feel like that touchdown at the end of the second quarter kind of blew a hole in them, and then from then on, it just kind of devolved and unfolded the rest of the way. I mean, you allowed 183 yards on the ground, couple of touchdowns on top of that as well. You allowed a whopping 16.1 yards per reception through the air, per completion through the air. Pretty wild statistic when you look at that number there. You're basically cutting through like a sixth of the field every single time you're letting them throw the football. But I will cut them some slack a bit, hence why I don't have them lower here. You're going up against the defending champions, but I would have expected a little bit of a better game from them. But Birmingham is an absolute unit, so I will take that into consideration a bit here, and hence why I have them at 6. And then coming in at number 5 to round out the bottom half of the league, we are looking at the St. Louis Battlehawks here, falling 18-16 to a 64-yard field goal. That there's really not much you can do about that. But this was one of those games that kind of surprised me a little bit here, because I would have thought we'd see more juice from an offense that was just so good last season here. But a really tough Panthers defense honestly kept them in check for a large majority of the game. Like, when you look at AJ McCarron's stat line, I feel like it paints like a false picture of how the game actually went, because a lot of that came late in the game, back half third quarter, going into that fourth quarter when they started putting points on the board to get things closer. But I mean, offensively, you were stuck going up against a Panthers defense that just was killing you. And I have some concerns regarding the O-line, allowing 3.5 sacks and just having a really hard time opening things up in the run game. I think that one of the things St. Louis really needs to look at going forward is how they can balance out their attack, because it just did not work for them. And again, it's early, so it's hard to tell, but you're left wondering, is it the offensive line? Is that the issue there? Is it the running backs? Or is the Panthers' run defense just really as good as it looked in that matchup there? But definitely something that I think is worth keeping in mind as we go through the early portion of this season. And then defensively, I kind of look at it as like a case of very hot, very cold. Taking advantage of an up and down kind of play day from E.J. Perry in Michigan. They came away with a couple of interceptions there. They were really good defending the pass, but ultimately just Wes Hills in the run game of Michigan was absolutely dominant. I mean, Wes Hills is a fantastic running back, and we saw that from what he did in the USFL last season in just 8 games, leading rusher. Dude was scoring touchdowns left and right. He's a very capable runner and receiver at that, and I don't know what's up with Wes Hills this year, but he looks bigger than he did last year, and that's just crazy to me because he's still just as effective, looks just as fast, but he looks bigger to me, and I don't know if it's just the uniform, the backplate he was wearing, I don't know, but he looked massive, and so it could just be that, you know, you were dealing with a unit that probably has a pretty good run offensive line in the run game, and on top of that, you have a really great running back in Wes Hills, a threatening quarterback that can also run the football in EJ Perry as well. Like I said, up and down as a passer, I would say, this past weekend, but on the ground, he was a threat, scoring his 2 touchdowns there. So I do think that, you know, St. Louis played well enough to win this game. It took them a little too long to get things going offensively, and had that happened a little bit earlier in the game, we're probably not looking at a 64-yard field goal to finish them off, but ultimately, they played well enough. You just had to get things going a little bit sooner, especially on the defensive side. Overall, it was a really good day for them defensively, aside from just allowing Wes Hills to do what he wants when he got going. But there's not much you can do about a 64-yard field goal to lose a football game. Like, you think you held the team to unreasonable range for them to be at, especially in, you know, spring football here. You're not expecting a kicker to do that, and then ultimately you watch him knock it through the uprights in back-to-back attempts there. So there's not much you can do there. But ultimately, a solid showing, come up short, and very unfortunate circumstances, and comical enough it's in Detroit, where we saw something like that not too long ago during the NFL football game between the Lions and the Ravens. Moving into the top half of the league now, though, at number 4, as we were just discussing them about while talking the St. Louis Battlehawks, I'm looking at the Michigan Panthers here. Obviously, big shout-outs to Jake Bates, man, banging in 2 64-yard field goals. That was awesome. It was absolutely awesome to see. Now, looking at this team, offensively, as I just kind of gushed over Wes Hills, we'll do it again here, keeping defensive coordinators up all night, each and every single week, is going to be the MO of Wes Hills. He did it last year, and it looks like he's going to do it again. He had 85 yards, averaged nearly 8 yards per attempt rushing, and he's someone who can catch out of the backfield. I think he had 1 reception for like -1 yards, but don't let him get going as a receiver as well, because he's clearly fine on the ground right now. He is running it back just like he was last year, but it can only get worse if he starts catching footballs out of the backfield, and he's a very capable pass catcher. Coupled with the threat of EJ Perry on the ground, who had a couple of rushing touchdowns, and a very capable backup running back in Matt Colburn, the run game for Michigan is going to be an issue for defenses to deal with. EJ Perry definitely has to protect the football better, though. A little disappointed with the couple of interceptions that he had, so that'll be something that we have to keep an eye on going forward. But I would say we're looking at 2 really strong games to 1 like 50-50 kind of game from EJ Perry in the 3 starts he's had for the Michigan Panthers to this point. And the O-line just kind of gave me a mixed bag of feelings. Like, I thought they dominated in the run game. They were very aggressive up front, just, you know, beating their opponents to the punch. But the pass protection was a little bit of an issue. Like, the sack totals and everything like that don't really match it. But when you just watch the game back, a lot of pressure in the pass. And maybe that's part of some of the issues that EJ Perry was dealing with. But ultimately, I think cleaning some things up and creating a safer pocket for EJ Perry to operate in is something that they should be considering going forward. Defensively, Kai Nakua simply has a nose for the football. 11 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. He had a sack. I mean, the guy was all over the field. They won the battle in the trenches, 3.5 sacks. Defensive tackle Daniel Wise, big part of that, swallowing up the middle of the defense. Couple of sacks. He had some tackles for loss as well. Big part of the reason why St. Louis was averaging just a measly 3.1 yards per attempt on the ground. You hold St. Louis to a 33% third down conversion rate, 5 of 15. I mean, it was not a great day for the offense of the Battlehawks, and in large part had to do with some big playmakers on that defense there. But overall, really good effort defensively. This could be a menace of a Panthers defense here. They have some really good players on that group that honestly didn't even have to have a big game, because we saw some newer people for this unit step up and have massive games. But there are some bona fide playmakers on that defense to keep an eye on. Do not sleep on the Panthers defense, because this could be a tough unit, and especially after just watching what they did to a St. Louis Battlehawks offense that is fairly consistent with who they were last year, and they basically just shut them down. Coming in at number 3, I'm looking at the Memphis Showboats here, 18-12 victory this past weekend. Offensively, the Showboats will compete for the Best Passing Attack title award all season long. 5 receivers going for over 30 yards, and on top of that, you had 4 receivers have at least 4 receptions or more. This is an offense with Case Cookus at the helm that is going to be able to distribute the football at will against pretty much any secondary that they go up against here. But they do have to find a way to run the football more consistently here. They either just absolutely suck at running the football here, or Houston has the best run defense in the league. And obviously, it's a little too early to tell either one of those things, but that's kind of my takeaway from this past weekend's game. Running back Darius Victor had 10 carries for only 3 yards, a 0.3 yard per attempt average, and then running back Titus Swen had another 4 carries for a flat 0 yards. So thankfully for the Showboats, football these days is a pass-first type of game. You can typically win more than you won't with a pass-first offense that is very successful, even if you don't necessarily run the football that well. It'd be a bigger problem if it was vice versa, hence why I kind of have the Showboats edged right above the Panthers. You win more passing than you do running the football this day and age. But overall, I mean, there's just so much talent as far as receivers go for who's going to get the football on this offense. Good luck defending them all season long. Case Cookus is very capable, and you have a litany of skill players on that offense over there in Memphis. Defensively, honestly, talk about taking a step above how they finished last season. 4 sacks on the day. You had 4 tackles for loss. You had 3 takeaways, which leads the league right now. Disruptive and opportunistic are kind of the 2 key words that I came away with in my notes while I was watching these games here. Excellent job on third down, keeping them at just a measly 3 of 8. And linebacker Greg Reeves, talk about stud. Dude deserves a shout out. 3 tackles, tackle for loss, 2 sacks, forced fumble. The Showboats, they're a unit. They're going to be a unit. The defense, I feel, has taken a step forward, and they were a pretty good unit last year. They were not flashy. They didn't have all the takeaways, but they were a team that could get it done, especially on third down in the red zone, keep teams out of the end zone. It was in that back half of the USFL season, so keep an eye on them because this is a much improved offense now that, again, needs to sort out the run game, but ultimately really good defense and an offense that can throw the football with some of the best of them. Threatening team, in my opinion. Coming in at number 2, we are looking at the San Antonio Brahmas. 27-12 victors this past weekend. This is not your San Antonio Brahmas from 2023. I will say that immediately. The balance on this offense was the best I think I saw all weekend long. It was beautiful here, rivaling what the Birmingham Stallions were able to do this past weekend here. 27 passes to 23 runs. They were able to do it all. On top of that, they were doing it while even only averaging 3.3 yards per carry. The willingness to keep forcing the football to be on the ground keeps defenses honest, and it opens things up for your passing game. And we saw that pay dividends for them in this matchup here. The willingness to go for it on fourth down, they were 3 of 4 on fourth down conversions. I love it. It's fun, exciting, but let's just see some third downs get converted here. It's not sustainable. While it is fun and exciting and, it gets the adrenaline pumping, 1 for 8 on third down is not ideal and is not a winning formula for football, so let's try to focus on that a little bit here. But quarterback Chase Garbers, impressive. 19 of 25, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns, took great care of the football. Running back Anthony McFarland took advantage of running lanes opening up. He had 9 attempts for 47 yards, a 20-yard long run on the day. But overall, just offense, beautiful, balanced, got the job done, and just absolutely decimated the DC Defenders defense from start to finish. On the defensive side, this could be a unit, especially up front, that could be even better than last season. You had 4 sacks on the day, just making Jordan Teamu's life difficult and awful from start to finish. The back end of the defense, 4 pass breakups. Cornerback Darius Phillips came away with an 88-yard interception. Linebacker Jordan Williams all over the football field, notched 10 total tackles on the day. Overall, the best way I can describe the Brahmas this past weekend was it felt like they were shot out of a cannon and they were there to make a statement, and they absolutely did just that. 27 points. You shut down a Defenders offense that was arguably the best in the XFL last season, a team that went 9-1 on the year. This was an exciting football team and an exciting result nonetheless, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where the Brahmas go heading into the remainder of the season. And then at number 1, to wrap things up, the Birmingham Stallions. 27-14 victory with so much talent on the roster. Not much of a surprise, in my opinion, to have them at number 1. I didn't do a week 1 power ranking simply because I just had a real hard time breaking down a power rankings that without any actual like tangible evidence of football. It's different when I do like the NFL going into the season, because while there is a lot of turnover, there's a lot more that you can watch and keep tabs on. Whereas like with the UFL, there's just not as much you can truly go by. And with a league merger like this, so much changed. For me, it just felt really hard to give like a true power rankings that I felt would make sense without me just kind of guessing where everyone was going to be. I want to go on like tangible evidence here as much as possible. Hence why I waited till week 2. But with the Stallions at number 1, Matt Corral, shaky start in the first half, but he seemed to settle in, especially after that touchdown late in the first half there to end the quarter in quarter number 2. Still plenty to work on, but I will say that that second half version of Matt Corral, if we can see more of that, the Stallions team should be A-okay offensively. The O-line and the running back room, 2 of the best, I would argue, in the UFL right now. Match made in heaven. CJ Marable and Ricky Pearson are going to be a 1-2 punch problem for defensive coordinators. 147 yards total out of the backfield, 2 touchdowns combined as well. Going to be a problem. And wide receiver Deon Cain, who came off a 3-touchdown event in the USFL Championship last season, basically just picked up where he left off. He was the team's leading receiver, 3 catches, 66 yards, the touchdown that helped tie things up going into the second half. And you had 5 players altogether with 30-plus receiving yards against the XFL's defending champions. This offense started out a little slow, but that second half, my goodness, it was like they were on a roller coaster that only went down. And then defensively, opportunistic as ever. This is kind of the MO of the Stallions the last couple of years. They were a stifling unit the first season of the USFL. They kind of took a slight step back in year number 2, but they were still very opportunistic, making the big plays when it mattered most to win games. And we saw that big time in this matchup against the Renegades. That forced fumble on the Renegades' opening drive was massive. Mark Gilbert made the recovery there, coming off of what was a big kick return plus a penalty that added 15 yards. That was a scary start, but defense, and being opportunistic and being aggressive, making a play when they had the opportunity. Then, late in the fourth quarter, big interception from who else but cornerback Mark Gilbert. Former Pittsburgh Mauler, shout out to him. Rip the Pittsburgh Maulers. They were my North teams from the USFL. Wish they were still here, but I'm glad that Mark Gilbert can bring that iron defense over into Birmingham and help lead this team to victory. I've got to say, this Birmingham Stallions team is just so good. On paper, on the field, they are oozing NFL caliber talent. They have so many players to look at and be excited about. They're going to be a unit again this season, and I really don't know who's going to dethrone them, but I'm very excited to see how this season plays out. That's it for me. As always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. Let me know your power rankings in the comment section down below. But I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.